Armed struggle.
National Democratic Revolution.
International solidarity works.
Progressive organizations.
Lumad.
Revolutionary taxation.
Solicitation drives.
These are some of the terms being used by the Communist Party of the Philippines, New People's Army, National Democratic Front or CPP, NPA, NDF to romanticize and legitimize its organizations and terrorist activities.
For 53 years now, the government and the media have unconsciously adopted the words used by the CPP, NPA, NDF due to the lack of better or appropriate terms. And in the process, we have unwittingly promoted the communist terrorist agenda and narratives to the point of romanticizing the CPP, NPA, NDF's evil deeds and crimes.
By using terms such as National Democratic Revolution and International Solidarity Works or ISW, we have unknowingly endorsed the communist terrorism of the CPP, NPA, NDF as if it is a tacit admission that our system of government is a failure.
We must stop the use of their terminologies in order for our people to see the true color and hidden intentions of the CPP, NPA, NDF, that they are a terrorist organization that has committed massacres of children, mass murders, extortion, exploitation and trafficking of children, murder of IP leaders, arson, and even destruction of Filipino families.
It is for this reason that the National Intelligence Committee prepared the common lines and terms when referring to threat groups for use of all our leaders, decision makers, government spokespersons, and the security sector.
These common lines and terms begin with the use of Communist Terrorist Group or CTG to refer to the CPP, NPA, NDF. Other terms include the following.
Refer to NPA members as CPP, NPA terrorists or CNTs or communist terrorists.
Terms related to the CTG's so-called armed revolution, such as People's Democratic Revolution, National Democratic Revolution, Socialist Revolution, Protracted People's War, and People's War, should not be used and be referred to instead as CPP, NPA terrorism or local communist armed conflict.
Use communist terrorism to refer to the armed struggle or red area operations.
Do not use legal struggle and instead refer to it as above-ground works.
What the CTG claims as its electoral or parliamentary struggle should be replaced with infiltration of government.
Instead of the so-called legal struggle in reactionary courts, use exploitation of the legal system.
Use CTG urban operational areas to refer to white areas. Similarly, use CTG urban operations to refer to white area operations.
The so-called NDF allied organizations or National Democratic Underground Mass Organizations should be referred to as CTG Underground Mass Organizations or UGMOS.
The sectoral organizations or the so-called progressive organizations should be referred to as what they really are, as CTG front organizations.
All forms and types of communist terrorist revolutionary taxation are extortion and should be referred to as such.
Other fund generation schemes of the CTG, including solicitation drives, project proposals, and portion of membership fees or butao, are considered and should be referred to as terrorism financing, relative to Republic Act 10168 or the Terrorism Financing Prevention and Suppression Act of 2012.
NPA Terrorist Squad should be used instead of Special Partisan Armed Units or SPARU, while SPARU or Partisan Operations should be referred to as NPA Terrorist Operations.
All party, political, and mass courses should be referred to as CTG radicalization courses or trainings. These include courses on maikling kurso sa lipunan at Rebolusyong Pilipino, araling aktivista, and espesyal na kursong masa, among others.
Meanwhile, the so-called Pambansang Demokratikong Paaralan or PADEPA, Paaralang Jose Maria Sison, and other CTG-owned or run schools should be aptly termed as CTG radicalization centers.
Educational discussions, or EDs, should not be used and instead be referred to as communist terrorist radicalization.
The CTG has also adopted widely accepted terms and twisted them to cover up for its terrorist operations. Some of these terms are as follows.
The CPP, NPA, NDF has adopted for its terrorist operations abroad the term International Solidarity Works, or ISW. Since international solidarity is an accepted concept by the United Nations, using ISW to refer to the international networking of the CPP, NPA, NDF immediately adds legitimacy to its terrorist network building and terrorism financing abroad. Thus, instead of ISW of the CTG, we should use International Terrorist Networking.
On youth recruitment, immersion, including exposure and tour of duty and NPA guerrilla bases, should be replaced with radicalization. Recruitment of children and youths and involving them in armed conflict is considered as child trafficking. Similarly, those who have been recruited as child warriors should be referred to as child soldiers.
On the CTG exploitation of the IPs, the CTG coined the term LUMAD in the late 1980s to control the identification of Mindanao indigenous peoples under the banner of the CPP, NPA, NDF. The term LUMAD and Kalumaran have since then been widely used to solicit foreign and local funding as part of the CTG's terrorism financing. Using the term LUMAD should be avoided and should be replaced with indigenous peoples or IPs in Mindanao.
Bagani is a tribal group formed by the IPs as a traditional defense system, but was exploited by the CTG to deceive the IPs into joining the NPA. The CTG uses this term to name some of its units, particularly the so-called Pulang Bagani Command in the Davao region. Hence, the term Bagani should not be used when referring to CTG units, and should be referred to as NPA terrorist units instead.
Taktikang Bakwit is one of the tactics of the CTG to exploit the IPs. The NPA instigates the forced evacuation of IPs from their communities to exploit the IPs' plight in propaganda and terrorism financing, as well as pressure local government units to give in to the NPA's demands. This modus operandi should be referred to as NPA-induced fake evacuations.
The term Bakwit should likewise not be used in this context, and instead use the terms evacuees or internally displaced persons or IDPs.
Relatedly, LUMAD Bakwit schools should be referred to as CTG radicalization centers for IPs.
Using these correct terminologies signifies the government's unified efforts against the terrorism of the CTG. This will make the CTG problem more understandable to the general public, which is another major step to a whole-of-nation approach in ending the local communist armed conflict.